Hey, superstars. Thanks for joining us today. I'm your host, Aaron Zakowski, and today I'm chatting with Ryan Shank. Ryan is the founder and CEO of PhoneWagon, a call tracking software that helps marketers and agencies to track which of their marketing campaigns are driving more phone calls and revenue. Ryan grew PhoneWagon from zero to over $1 million in annual revenue in just 4 years and recently sold his company to CallRail. Hey, Ryan, how you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
For sure. Would love to hear a little bit more about your background, how you kind of started PhoneWagon, and how you grew that to be able to sell so quickly in just 4 years.
Yeah, absolutely. So, starts out actually before PhoneWagon, I was COO at a company called mHelpDesk that was in the category of field service software. And when I was there, we were basically selling software to small businesses to help them manage, work orders and scheduling and everything like that. And that company ended up getting acquired by HomeAdvisor, which is a huge marketplace for home services. And when I was there, a lot of the businesses that were buying the field service software to sort of manage the jobs were also buying leads from HomeAdvisor and Angie's List. They're buying leads from a bunch of different places. And what we found is that a lot of those businesses, while they were getting, people submitting forms and online lead requests, a lot of them also were getting phone calls as well. And they valued, especially in the home services industry, they valued phone calls incredibly highly because, these are businesses that are on the go. And a lot of times a phone call is someone looking for something. It's a consultation. So I sort of saw that the need in the market was like, hey, they want to be able to get these phone calls as leads, and saw that there was a need to sort of track the phone calls in addition to the web leads. So when I was leaving that company, a couple things were happening that I thought was interesting. It was summer of 2016. So Twilio was IPOing that summer. So there was a lot of sort of eyeballs on telephony and that space and different applications that people were building on top of Twilio. So that was interesting. There was a couple other companies that were sort of launching in the phone telephony space, more for the enterprise, like Dialpad. There's a company called TalkDesk back then that I kind of had an eye on, which funny enough, recently, this company TalkDesk just raised at a $10 billion valuation just now. Back then, they obviously weren't that high, but they were still kind of on my radar. So, and as I was leaving mHelpDesk and I was trying to decide what I wanted to do next, a couple of things. One, I wanted to stay in my lane. I think there's a big value. Especially if this is a B2B marketing podcast, I think there's value in sort of doing what staying in your lane. I didn't want to go and start, a Shopify store and go direct to consumer or e-commerce. I didn't really want to go enterprise because I didn't know that space, right? I sort of wanted to stay SMB, B2B. So I was, kind of taking a look, and I was like, oh, I think this could be interesting. If you could build something on Twilio, there's a lot of hype in the phone space, right? People moving from desk phone to cloud. Hey, can you start something here? So that's how I was like, all right, I want to take a stab at going after the telephony space. And that's what I did in really summer of 16 is when I kind of started building it. And that's how we sort of stumbled and landed on PhoneWagon.
Yeah, and I saw there's an article I guess you wrote on Neil Patel's blog talking about how you actually built the platform and the whole website and business for about 40 grand, which is quite incredible.
Yeah, it was cool. I'm actually really glad I wrote that article. I think it was, I wanted to document my kind of process and sort of what I did to initially start it. I think especially now it's starting to get really popular to sort of build in public and to kind of share openly. I think back then, there was a few companies that were doing it, like Buffer was sort of the pioneer in sort of this open startup. And then a lot of times on indie hackers, people are, hooking up their metrics and sort of building openly. And it's a lot more common. I think kind of before it was this thing of hey, do we kind of stay closed? Do we not disclose anything? And I wanted to sort of be open and sort of share the process. And I think that article actually was It was pretty cool. It ranks really highly even now for if you search any terms like launch B2B SaaS company, build its #1 organic result. And, people are finding it every day. And it's really cool the messages I get. People are like, hey, I saw this article and I'm really inspired. Like even every single week now, still 4 years later, which is the crazy power of just like organic search, I get messages, people, telling me that they found it and this is what they're building and that sort of thing. So so it was really cool. And again, I just wanted to sort of document the journey and sort of do this like open, hey, here's what I did. And, see if you can apply it in another B2B SaaS software.
Nice. So I'm curious, you mentioned the fact, that the idea of keeping, revenues public and things like that and disclosing all of that online. I've seen discussions and debates about that, in certain online communities that I'm a part of. What's your rationale? What's your thinking about why you would think that, your earnings and your growth should be public and why you want to share that?
Look, I think, I do get, if you're too small, right, then people might not take you seriously. So I definitely understand the like, hey, we want to maybe like appear bigger than we are. But I think now, right, it's pretty common to just sort of like, just be open and sort of humanize yourself. And I think a lot of people can relate when you're building a company, like, hey, this is where we're at. Here's our revenues. Like people almost want to get sort of behind the story and sort of like be a part of that journey. And I think a lot of times too, there's a certain type of customer that like feels connected when they feel like they know the founder, they can see the metrics, they sort of like are following the journey. That said, if it's larger companies, they might not want to get behind a super early, small startup. So you might lose some deals because they're like, well, look, you're like, doing, 100K in annual revenue and we don't feel comfortable putting our billion-dollar company sort of like on your platform. There might be like platform risk, whatever it is. But yeah, I think like the openness and just if you're trying to differentiate maybe like in the crowd and create like a brand, I think there is value in humanizing it instead of just being, a software product.
Yeah, no, I think a bunch of brands. I mean, yours is definitely a great example. I think about, Dave Rogan-Moser over at Proof and his team, how they've just been have the personalities who are running the company and their advertising and a lot of their branding. You look at Trainual, you look at a lot of small B2B focused companies. And I think, people want to do business with people. So having the founders front and center, I think is really interesting.
Definitely, yeah.
So tell me, so at the beginning, you launched this product, you got it going. How did you get that initial traction and customers going? What advertising, what marketing were you doing there?
Yeah, I think like, especially, with B2B software, there's a few things that are pretty common, right? People can do ad buys, right? You can kind of do a Facebook ad campaign. You can, set up a landing page. You can, buy some Google ads. Again, those things are expensive and you got to be able to, track them to make sure that that you're getting the return on ad spend and that it's worth it. One thing that we did, we did it. I've seen it in a lot of different areas. Is there's a lot of like there's a lot of like review sites that you're able to sort of use that you can sort of pay. They're pay to play, right? So there's Capterra. There's G2, there's a bunch of these software review sites. And one thing that I thought was interesting, and I knew this from the previous company I was at was Capterra, where basically like they show up #1 in organic search for pretty much any software category, right? Like if you search for CRM software, Capterra is going to be #1 organic result, probably even #1 paid result. And the listing that they dump you into is sort of like they actually default to sort of like a directory, but it's also a review site of all the different software products in that category. So if I search CRM software, I'm going to hit Capterra and I'm going to find, probably Salesforce and probably like Pipedrive and whatever it is. So, we were able to just create a listing. Anyone can create a listing on those sites. You can build out your profile, put your screenshots, put a nice description, get some reviews from like, even if you have 5 customers, just ask the customers to create reviews on there, right? Mm-hmm. And then if you're paying to sort of be at the top of there, you can sort of like get that pass through organic traffic, right? If someone's just searching against CRM software, if someone's searching for, screen sharing software tool, call tracking software, whatever the software tool is, they're going to hit there. And then if you're paying to sort of be at the top, you're going to get that traffic as well.
So when you're a new company starting off, you get on Capterra, you get on G2, and like you're the new kid on the block, and Twilio's already up there and CallRail's already up there and all the other companies. Are you able to compete just by coming in and saying, let me just bid and you're going to get traffic instead away from those big guys?
Yeah, it's completely pay to play, right? Like again, the default listing result is shown as sponsored, so you can pay to sort of like be at the top, and so you'll be number one on there if you're paying the top bid to get those clicks. So you can literally sort of pay to sort of be at the top, and then you can link off from there to a landing page. So like any B2B SaaS company could sort of create the profile, pay to kind of bid to sort of be at the top. You don't have to be number one, right? Because that's probably the highest, but there's still traffic at 2-3 spots on those listings. And then you could kind of link to a landing page that, you're going to be able to get conversions from. So it's an interesting place because, it might be more expensive. You'd have to kind of run the numbers more expensive than sort of if you're just doing ad buys on Google Ads and then Facebook. Like if you don't have enough data to sort of get the targeting right, like you can sort of use those platforms or Capterra specifically to sort of get that really relevant traffic.
Interesting. I mean, it's interesting because, I know so many people are obviously advertising on these comparison platforms and very few people that I've seen actually really talking about how it works. How do the reviews actually play into the rankings over there? If someone's got 500 reviews and you've got 5 reviews and you're coming in, if you're paying to play, are you still, is that going to affect you in terms of your results? The fact that you've got so few reviews, and if someone's not paying to play, are those reviews really going to make any impact whatsoever on those platforms?
So again, I haven't looked at it like very recently, but historically it was, again, the default kind of ranking was by sponsored. So it's whoever's paying. So as long as, if you haven't paid, you're actually like going to be in the regular listings sort of like at the bottom, and then like the paid listings are going to be at the top, and then whoever's sort of like paying more is going to be at the very top. So even the person with like more reviews might be 2 or 3 if you're outbidding them for that number 1 spot. So and I think people, when they click through, are sort of like just they're not changing the sort. They might be, but back it at least used to default though to the sponsored instead of number of reviews.
Gotcha. So do you think if all the sponsored posts are at the top, is there still value? Would you recommend that a small B2B SaaS company who's kind of getting started, should they still be focusing on getting reviews over there? Or, is there one platform that you would recommend over others in terms of where you're most likely to see success?
I think B2B software companies should absolutely focus on reviews, right? I think like, people these days are looking for reviews. They're looking for social proof. They want to kind of get something that's sort of de-risked a little bit from a review element. So I absolutely think that the reviews, again, this is more qualitative, saying like, hey, I think that the reviews will help with conversion. So drive the reviews. That also kind of helps bulk up your profile and sort of gives you more legitimacy. And yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of sites that I think are interesting and valuable for the reviews. I think G2 is, they've raised a ton of money and they seem like they're killing it as well. Capterra, obviously, I'm a big fan of. I think like reviews on kind of all those sites are incredibly valuable.
Nice. All right. So you used these review sites, you kind of got your initial traction, you got some initial customers, started growing. I know from conversations with lots of people, the traffic you're going to get from Capterra G2 is really strong, but it's also limited just based on how many searches are coming through, just like Google search might be. How did you continue that growth to kind of hit the numbers and revenue numbers that you did?
It's kind of like all, I think in B2B, it's more of like a long tail of a bunch of different channels, right? I think you have to do the review sites, you have to do the paid spends, you have to do communities, you have to do maybe outbound, which we were never able to kind of figure out, but obviously more in like, and again, it depends. I know this is a B2B podcast, so some people will have, the average cost per sale and the average revenue per sale to sort of justify sort of that SDR AE model and go outbound. So I think it's a combination of paid ad spend, social, paid ad spend, search, Google ads, review sites, outbound, community building, which is huge right now. You're seeing like a lot of projects start up their own communities, whether it's on a Discord channel or whether it's on a platform like Circle, which I know is like kind of like a more private community, whatever it is, right? I think, especially for B2B, it's a long tail of all these different things that you're sort of like kind of picking up sales from each of these different channels. You're looking at it, hey, which channel is ROI positive, and kind of seeing if you can increase ad spend on those channels and sort of killing the channels that it might not be profitable. And I think in the very early days too, you really have to say like, look, is it profitable in the short term? What's our payback period? It might not be, but honestly, if you take a longer term approach of saying, hey, this channel is not really profitable right now, but we're driving top line, and these eventually are going to lead to referrals and that sort of thing. You have to almost take a longer term view of things instead of like, hey, is my, payback period of my CAC to LTV, ROI positive right now? Maybe not. So I think it's definitely looking at it from like a long-term perspective and kind of all these different channels added up.
Nice. So thinking about long-term perspective and communities and such, you once mentioned to me that, in the early stages, you kind of were building relationships actually in a lot of these communities, and that was a big lever to help you guys grow. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think like, and it's interesting now, even with stuff that I'm doing now, I'm like really paying attention to communities and how people are building communities. They're inside of communities. Communities are helping launch projects. They're helping with that. But yeah, I think it's important to sort of like be on the ground. And it's funny, I see like Gary Vee right now. He's huge in NFTs, and he's one, building his own community with like his NFT project, which is called V Friends. And he's like super deep in the Discords, right? He's chatting with people. I think it's like very important to not just sort of like have a community, know that it's there, but to really be a part of it, to be doing meetups and to be doing, having real relationships and really being like immersed with your customers and your potential customers and being one of them. And I think that sort of will lead downstream to people trusting you, to knowing you, to, them then recommending your product to other people in the community, like, oh, he or she is one of us, and, they're in here, and here's the product that, there's just so much more awareness and this like real level of relationship.
Yeah, nice. So basically, sounds like, growing PhoneWagon, you had a lot of different channels, Capterra, communities, paid ads, et cetera. Can you share a little bit of kind of how you got to the point where the acquisition came along? Is there any part of the story with that you should share? I know these things tend to be, somewhat private and in the early stage since the acquisition, but any part of that story you can share how that came about?
Yeah, I mean, I think anytime you're sort of like in a market and you're gaining traction, you're going to be noticed from, other players in the space or other products that, you could be complementary towards. So I think we were chatting, just at a high level with a few people kind of in the space as customers are starting to talk about us, they're starting to use us, they're starting to like, you just sort of like get on the radar of other companies, competitors, complementary products, right? Like if you, I'm trying to think of a good example, but I'm curious how the Slack Salesforce acquisition came about, but regardless, I think like, we we were just kind of getting a little bit of, not a little bit, we were getting traction, and we were kind of making a name for ourselves in the space. And I think that sort of just gets you on the radar of these other people. And so when it kind of makes sense to sort of join forces, I think it makes sense. And in our case with CallRail, like, it totally made sense, right? Like they're the best product in the space. And, it was such a win-win for the customers and team and product and everything like that, that it's like, hey, when it makes sense to join forces, like, absolutely, like, let's do that. Let's make this a massive win for our customers. And, at the end of the day, that's what we're all trying to do. We're trying to make the best product, the best experience for the customers to have, like, the best outcome. And when that opportunity came, I was like, absolutely, that just totally makes sense. And, the customers are going to win here. So that's sort of like how it came about. And it's like, why build two different product roadmaps that are relative, potentially similar or overlapping, when we can combine forces, have more resources, and have this huge win for the customers.
Nice. So now that you've had this big success, this big exit, I'm pretty sure you've kind of moved on and you're no longer working on the project anymore. What's next for Ryan Shank? Like, where are you seeing opportunities within the market, within the investing landscape? What are you up to now?
Oh my God. So the space is crazy. Like, even since I left PhoneWagon like 3-4 months ago, you're starting to see, you're starting to see companies are really good right now. Like, they're launching and the products are incredible. The communities they're building are incredible. The space is moving so fast, not just in like SaaS and tech, but like in crypto and that whole world. You're starting to see, founders have their own rolling funds. I think even early stage VCs without great brand names are having a tough time competing with these founders who have like either syndicates and are funding companies. So I'm looking at a lot of this, like, smart contracts, a bunch of stuff that's happening on blockchain. I think it's crazy interesting. There's going to be a lot of use cases that are going to be applicable in other more traditional areas, like creating smart contracts in, fractionalization is super interesting to me, something that I'm really looking at right now. So I'm kind of looking at that space a lot right now, and see what you can do on the blockchain to kind of apply to more traditional stuff outside of just art and collectibles.
And so are you thinking, is your mind more, hey, I'm ready to start my next business soon, or are you now Ryan Shank, the investor?
No. So I've been doing some like angel investing, some NFT stuff, but I'm looking at how we can apply that to create a new company. And that's, I love the idea of creating something. I think, like, especially in the early days, and really everything I've done so far, I get super energized from the creative process and, like, building something from scratch, building a product that, you have this thesis on, and then once you're able to, like, talk to customers and build it and seeing them use it, like, that is so fulfilling when they start, like, using your product and literally organically telling their friends to use your product and then seeing them use it every single day. Like, that is so incredibly awesome that I want to, like, jump back into that and start just, like, building again and creating content and kind of going back to those, like, early days where, the process is really about, like, creating.
Nice. That totally makes sense. Inspiring me to even think about, like, the fun that would be to build a company like that.
Yeah, it's super fun. I think also, that's where I'm good at. I want to get better at being, like, a manager and, like, managing, but I think, like, I personally like the kind of early stuff of creating versus, like, managing and, like, process and that sort of thing.
Awesome. Super. This was really great. We learned a ton here. Let's jump into a quick lightning round, a couple quick questions, quick fast answers, and
Sure.
We'll go from there. So first question, is there a book that you would recommend to our listeners to read? Could be fiction, business. What are you reading now?
I like Atomic Habits from James Clear. It's it's kind of about, like, it's sort of about the compound effect, about how, like, you can get 1% better and it kind of compounds over time, but how to sort of, like, build in these habits into your everyday life and stack the habits so that you can just do those things. But I think it's really helpful if you want to sort of like be your best self.
Nice. What's your favorite marketing or productivity tool right now?
I love Intercom. I think live chat is amazing. I think, the product that they built with the app, being able to tag people, I just love Intercom.
Okay, fantastic. Who's a marketer or business leader that you're learning from right now?
Two people. Scooter Braun, I think he's a genius with a lot the way he's combining sort of like tech with influence with private equity. And I also like Michael Rubin, CEO of Fanatics. I think he's making crazy, huge moves. And again, both of those guys I feel like are playing this like really long-term chess game instead of this short-term kind of quick grab.
Nice. And last question is, where can our listeners go to learn more about you?
Twitter, Ryan A. Shank, or my new company, Cameo Ventures, is what I'm using as like a product studio to sort of launch different products.
Okay, awesome. Ryan, appreciate your time. This has been fantastic. And I know you showed a ton of value that our listeners are really going to learn a lot from. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for having me.